Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, May 20th, 2026, and today we're talking farmers markets do's and don'ts. Do farmers markets make sense? And the state of farmers markets, so let's do it. All right, glorious Wednesday to you all. I hope everyone is doing well so far this week. So far, so good here. We had a solid and productive work day yesterday, mostly just harvesting, but it was solid and productive. And Scape season has begun, which means, per usual this time of year, I smell amazing. Scapes just being the flowers of the hardneck garlic, sometimes called pigtails. These flowering stalks have to be popped off to encourage the garlic to put its energy into bulb production. I mean, they'll still form a bulb if you let the scape grow, but the loss in yield from not popping them off can be quite substantial, in the 10 to 20% range or more, though for certain varieties it can be like significantly higher. So like if you sold a bed of garlic for, I don't know, $1,000 usually, by removing the scapes, you could sell that same bed for as much as $1,200 plus whatever you get for the scapes, which is a pretty, that's a pretty sweet deal and a significant difference. Though of course it does take some work, to harvest them, and I have to go through at least 2 times to get them all out. The video clip you're watching, in fact, is the second pass. But scapes are tasty in the kitchen, pickled, stir-fried, pestoed, you name it. Restaurants also love them. I used to like lacto ferment them and then make a pretty mean salsa once the pepper season started. In particular, I liked adding a little bit of the habanero just because it's delicious, but flavor-wise, habanero, that sort of fruity flavor is one of my favorites. But anyway, yeah, scapes for the win. And in fact, I even found some literature out there on scape removal's effect on garlic nutrition, but stupid science paywalls. That meant I couldn't read any of them. Even Sci-Hub couldn't come through on that one, so I'll have to request the articles. But that could be interesting to read about as well, just figuring out how popping the scape actually changes the nutrition of the garlic. Anyway, yeah, got a lot of work to do going into this next week, but it also looks like a lot of rain on the way, so that may get in the way of some things, which is nice because I kind of, could use a little bit of a break and some rain. Don't forget to let us know what you all are up to right now, or better yet, upload a 20-second farm video clip to Drive or Dropbox or whatever and share that with farmermike@no-tillgrowers.com. Love those. All right, so here's the plan for today. Per usual, on Wednesdays, we put together a little compilation episode for you. This one on farmers markets, are they worth it, do's and don'ts, and the state of farmers markets with guest Cat Fields White. So we hope you enjoy. Okay, so one thing I want to start talking about on this show is different marketing options and whether or not I think one is a good idea or not based on a given situation. So let's start with one of the most popular ways to break into marketing your produce or products, the farmer's market. Does it make sense to sell at a farmer's market or at a farmer's market to what you're already doing, like a CSA or wholesale or whatever? This was something that came up a lot during the panel I helped with on Saturday, and something I've thought about a lot since then. First, here are some positive attributes of selling at farmer's markets. One, and arguably my favorite attribute, is that it is low stress. There is very little commitment on your end. If you don't have enough produce that week, for instance, which can certainly happen when you are just starting out, you can just bring whatever you have or save it for the next week and skip the market. Sure, some customers will be bummed that you're not there, perhaps, but unlike a CSA where the customers have paid already for that week, no one is expecting anything at farmer's market per se, so there is no way to let them down. Of course, one obligatory note here that you should always try to be consistent in coming to the farmer's market, but still, you don't have to, which takes a lot of the pressure off. 2, farmers markets can be quite profitable in the right situation. The right situation would be one where there are a lot of customers and a reasonable amount of vendors, most of whom do not sell what you sell, and you can move a lot of product. 3, farmers markets can pay a nice complement to other outlets and open up options for new outlets. For instance, when we were running a CSA, a weekly vegetable subscription, which I will discuss more in time, but sometimes we would offer crops like squash for a couple weeks to our CSA, stop offering squash for 2 weeks, and then do a 3rd week later on so as not to bombard people with this prolific crop. Having the farmer's market meant that we could move the squash during the weeks we were not giving it to our CSA, which was awesome. Okay, so number 4, you can charge more at farmers markets because it's basically a mobile retail shop. It's basically like having a brick and mortar shop for your farm products, but without the brick or the mortar. Number 5, markets provide fun social interactions in an industry that can often feel quite isolating. Hard to overstate how lonely this job of farming can be, especially if you don't take on business partners. Now, there are more benefits, and without question, farmers markets can be profitable. But if I'm weighing my options, here are some negatives that I would consider. One, farmers markets can be hard to get into, especially if you just grow what everyone else grows. I've talked about the value of being certified organic in the eyes of customers, but it's also helpful in the eyes of farmers market boards. Mom and pop farms with no certification are, and I say this with absolute affection, a dime a dozen. Certified organic farms are not super common in many regions, so perhaps that certification not only gets you an instant customer base at the market, but gets you into the market to begin with because they are lacking organic vendors. That was the case for us. We easily got into a really big market because we were certified organic. Okay, negative number two, farmers markets are very time and labor intensive. On the harvest side, everything has to be individualized or unitized, meaning unlike a wholesale account where you maybe bag 5 or 10 pounds of lettuce at a time, for the farmers market, you are bagging quarter or half pound bags at a time, which can quadruple the washing and packing work. That time has to be factored into calculating whether a market is actually profitable for you or not. Also, in terms of labor and time, there is the time of travel to and from the market, the early morning setup, the time spent selling, the breakdown, the unpacking, and so on. So a day at the farmer's market, depending on how far you have to drive, can equate to 8 hours or more of just selling. Comparing that to a few hours dropping off food to restaurants, and it's a big difference. That time, especially when you have kids and all those things, will be important to you. Number three, rain, wind, snow, cold, heat. I'm sure you've heard of all of these. If your market is outdoors, you are likely to suffer at least a couple weeks every season that are just the absolute pits in terms of experience and of sales. Obviously, most retail or service industries take weather hits, but when your retail shop is outdoors, the effects can be quite acute. There are more negative and more positives to farmers markets, of course, because there is no one perfect, easy way to sell something. Today's episode is brought to you by Grown By. Grow smarter with Grown By, the farmer-owned cooperative. Grown By is the platform for online sales of everything, custom and traditional CSAs, halves of beef, flower bouquets, wholesale to restaurants, and now Grown By supports in-person sales too. Their new app, Grown By Register, you can supercharge your market and farm stand, finally bringing together your online and offline sales and customer data. Grown By is proud to make local food accessible by processing SNAP benefits online and in person right within the app. Grown By helps you put your best food forward. Schedule a demo at coop.grownby.com/no-till. That's coop.grownby.com/no-till. Today's episode is also brought to you by Good Agriculture. If the season is picking up and the pile of receipts is starting to grow, you're not alone. Good Agriculture handles farm bookkeeping so you can stay ahead of the mess before it piles up. They keep your books organized each month, help you understand what's coming in and what's going out, and show you where your farm stands so you can make better business decisions throughout the season. If you're behind, they'll help get everything caught up. They also help farmers find funding and stay ahead of grant deadlines. You run the farm, they help the business. Learn more at goodagriculture.com/info. That's goodagriculture.com/info. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Casista DVM, who writes, quote, "When you're looking for a contentious and debatable topic, which I know is really not your style and good on you, you might consider addressing farm stand and farmers market etiquette. What produce handling pet peeves have you seen in farmers markets that would impact their ability to sell to the general public? And how do farm stand marketers set their customers up for success? This is such a contentious topic among some growers, and it touches on the frequent inability of experts to connect with their clients in the general public. An opportunity to impress and alienate a customer could be turned into a learning opportunity for the buyer, how to handle the produce, and the seller, what does the market really want from the producers? As always, setting a helpful example can reduce barriers within the profession," end quote. Okay, so great question and commentary, and have no fear, this will not be the most contentious topic of the week now. So, however, I could see this getting contentious in situations where an established farmer who has been selling for years and has their routine
is missing out on sales or alienating customers because of something they regularly do and doesn't want to hear about it or change, even though the markets change. Like customers and what their preferences are change all the time. And you kind of do have to keep an eye on that. To be clear, it's fine not to change. No one has to change. And some people find a niche and stick with it, even if it doesn't necessarily lend itself to growth, or even if sales start to decline. I'm not going to judge, but I can share some tried and true farmers market tricks that anyone can use to boost sales with little to no effort. So, not sure if it totally answers your question, Casista, but here's a quick list. First, always stand at the farmer's market or hire someone who can stand if you are not able to. Sitting has a leave me alone vibe to it. It's not the most inviting posture. And remember, at a farmer's market, you are asking people to cease their stride and come buy something from you. Being inviting is the key. To that point, I say good morning to every single person that walks by. Especially if there are no customers in the booth, I will walk to the front of my booth and greet every passerby until a customer comes in. It's almost like a dam or something. Once like that little bit of water trickles through, the dam breaks and the customers flood in. But sometimes you have to get that first trickle going first. Display is also a big part of sales. In market farming, we have a saying. It's called pile it high and kiss it goodbye, meaning that the more bountiful your display looks, the faster things will sell. In fact, going into the canopy, higher into the canopy versus spreading out on the tables can be more attractive while also protecting the produce from sunshine, which is a produce and sales killer. Indeed, I cannot tell you how often I see a display of produce that looks absolutely ragged from wind and heat and sunshine, with wilted greens and bags of lettuce baking in the sun like tiny little greenhouses. There is no customer who heads out to buy local produce and spend local produce prices that is like, I kind of hope it's half dead when I buy it. So bringing things in coolers with ice, regularly refreshing them, becomes a near constant chore on a hot day, but an essential one. We also mist regularly with clean, fresh water as somebody would in a grocery store. Emphasis on clean water. Don't use the same bottle you brought last week. Always bring fresh, cold water. When I do a farmer's market, I am busy from start to finish and only stop moving in the slow season. And even then, just barely stop moving. Lastly, come fresh. You can get away with it when you're young, but as you get older, harvesting until dark and then trying to be cheery on a Saturday morning is not a viable long-term recipe for success. For a Saturday market, for example, I recommend trying to get to that point that you harvest on Thursday and Friday morning and then either be done or have someone else finish the work on Friday afternoon. That way you're ready to go on Saturday. Anyway, those are some things that come to mind that I see farmers doing that ultimately sort of hurt their business, but there are also many different contexts and ways to do things. There are also different goals for each farm. So for some growers, if you're happy with your sales and what you're doing, then don't listen to me. But if you can glean something from what I just said, great. I certainly never stop learning myself. And in fact, feel free to put your pet peeves and strategies in the comments. Maybe I'll learn something there.
Today's episode is brought to you by BCS America. If you're practicing no-till or low-till farming, you know that heavy equipment is often the enemy of your soil structure. That's where BCS two-wheeled tractors come in. Built for small farms, market gardens, and regenerative growers, BCS tractors give you the power to manage beds efficiently without unnecessary compaction. For the low and no-till grower, there are two attachments that change the game. The BCS Power Harrow stirs only the top inch or two of soil to incorporate soil amendments and create a perfect seed bed without soil inversion or pulling up weed seeds. And when it's time to terminate cover crops, that flail mower shreds organic matter into a beautiful, nutrient-rich mulch right on top of the bed. To find your local dealer and see the full lineup of attachments designed for the way you farm, head to bcsamerica.com. That's bcsamerica.com. All right, back to the show. Okay, so one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is you have your hand in a lot of these things, and you also have a good understanding of farmers markets kind of around the country. You talk to a lot of these people. Can you talk about what you see as sort of the current state of farmers markets? I know with funding and grants and those things have been tough for some markets, but with the season in swing, like how are markets faring right now? Those sorts of things?
So the business at farmers markets in terms of sales for farmers and our local food maker producers is really good. Currently, that Little Italy market and the other markets that I've developed and operated in San Diego are being run by my daughter, who's the next generation of farmers market managers. And I concentrate on farmers market pros. We do have a podcast, as you mentioned, that's weekly. We have an online a private Facebook group that's very, very active. We host a conference once a year for farmers market managers, farmers, and participants. So I do talk to folks in a lot of the country about what's going on. And it seems to be pretty consistent that the farmers are doing well, the food makers are doing well. Grocery store prices in those big box stores have gone up for a lot of different reasons. Farmers and food makers have tended to kind of hold the line. They've been good about not gouging or anything. As eggs have gone up in the grocery store, they're still charging what they've always charged for eggs. So we're actually seeing better business than we ever have at the farmers markets right now around the country. Now, the tricky thing is when you mention federal funding and what a interesting thing that has been this year is that a lot of farmers markets are operated by organizations that also do things like nutrition incentive programs, and they do cooking lessons for people to teach them how to eat healthy, and they go into schools and provide people with bonus bucks that they can use at the farmers market that give them more purchasing power if they're on SNAP or what used to be called food stamps. Those programs aren't typically able to be funded just by vendor fees or small sponsorships. Those oftentimes come from farmers market promotion program grants from the USDA. And that's what's had a huge interruption this year. So a lot of the nonprofits that are in the business of operating farmers markets are really struggling, partly because they don't have the grant funding, but even more because instead of saying, hey, we're going to discontinue this grant and in 2 years you won't be able to get that, instead the government said, hey, we have a contract with you. You've spent money. You're getting ready to submit for reimbursement. And we've decided we're not going to do that anymore.
Yeah, that makes things very tough. Like you said, there's also all these different things that farmers markets are doing and farmers market managers are doing that are not necessarily as obvious, right? When you just think of a farmers market, you mentioned there's double dollars programs, and like you said, going to the schools, all the marketing and those sorts of things. Like if the farmers were having to pay for all of that as well, or the community was having to pay for all of that as well, it would be significantly more difficult to operate that way, I guess.
Right, exactly. You can charge farmers and food makers and maybe throw a few crafters in and make that a break-even, at least, proposition for operating a farmer's market. There's enough there to pay a market manager that is dedicated to all the regulatory things that we have to do and the marketing and writing those newsletters and all that good stuff. But when you get into more outreach and more programs that are benefiting your community, that takes some extra dollars from somewhere.
Yeah, and I also think about the market managers I've known have support, helpers that are often paid by these federal funds and, these other programs. And they are still, even with that help, borderline overworked, if not completely overworked. They do so much, certainly during the season and even in the off season. So I'm just thinking in terms of the market manager, has that increased the difficulty level, or what are you seeing in terms of that?
Yeah, probably so. We had a lot of market managers that frankly burned out or had been coming up on retirement age, but accelerated that during pandemic protocols. Because during COVID-19, it became much more expensive to run a farmer's market. Oftentimes you weren't allowed to have anything but farmers. You had to fence in the markets, count people in and out. There were a lot of things that had to be done. And it was very stressful because, of course, in our country, we've got a lot of division of opinion on whether any of that was necessary. And you had people that were hostile about the fact that our city required us to make them wear masks. And so farmers market managers and assistants who didn't really sign up to be policing people. That wasn't the kind of job we did. We're more of a marketing and organization function. We're under a lot of stress. So we saw a lot of people leave. We've seen a lot of new managers come in. We've understood more, I think, as an industry that farmers market management is a full-time job. We're going to print t-shirts one day that say, what do you do the other 6 days? Just to laugh about it, because people seem to think that you just show up and it happens. But it is a full-time job, and we are campaigning to make sure that farmers market managers get paid like any other operations manager would for a grocery store or for a marketing agency. And I think there's a little bit of a struggle with that right now. There's still a lot of folks that think that, farmers markets are cute and this should be done by volunteers, and why would anybody get paid to do this? And so I think there's still some educating to do in terms of making people understand that farmers markets don't just happen, as the hashtag goes.
like a crab that's molten from a shell. I crawl out uncomfortably.
All right, we hope you enjoyed that little compilation episode. Always fun when we can stack some of the info that we've done on these subjects together, because at 400 plus episodes now, that's well over like 1,000 different segments, which is many. So yeah, fun to do some revisiting there. Otherwise, Wednesday is in the bins day. Congratulations to Arsenal. Honestly, I just wanted to draw out of that game, so that actually helped us out, keeping our Europa League dreams alive. So appreciated that, Man City. Otherwise, don't forget, No Till Growers is a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Big thank you to Michelle. Big thank you to No Till Growers Board of Directors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soul Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support this work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of May, you get a shout on the show. So big shout outs today to our newest nematode, Jacob Bierle. Yep, totally. All right. As you will remember from this week's story, our heroine, Moore, is on tour with her trio and playing Red Rocks in Colorado, which sounds awesome, when suddenly everything goes wrong, or sort of wrong. She starts playing the wrong song right in the middle of the set, and she just can't stop. She can't help herself. The bandmates are looking at her, and the audience is looking at her, but she's just going, and eventually the rest of the band stops and walks up to her and asks her if she's okay, and that is when she just collapses, completely shuts down, and passes out on stage. Show's over, and she wakes up a couple days later in the hospital with a lot of explaining to do. Why? Well, that is for tomorrow. Sign-ups pending, of course, on our trios down to 2. Actually, that may be a Lion King reference. I don't know. We'll find out. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.